All right, so today we have Caroline DeMesquita, and she is a coach for what is it? What company do you coach for, by the way?
I am independent, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
Um, if I remember, it was like what is it? What's his name? Jason Theobald. Any connection to him, by chance?
No, I had actually spoken with Jason about possibly joining his team, but
Mm.
I am independently coaching. I'm getting mentored by Jeffrey Sue from First Call Out Fitness. But
Uh,
I've worked with several different companies in the industry, learning from them. I was with Nutrition Dynamic for about 9 months, went through their entire training program, and have or not a degree, a certificate from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition
mm.
for holistic coaching. So, been coaching almost, I would say, 3 years consistently. I coached a handful of people before that when I first got into fitness about 5 years ago,
Mm.
but now I am coaching full time for females mostly. I do have some male clients, and I also am a posing coach for NPC bodybuilding athletes in bikini, wellness, and figure.
Nice.
Awesome.
So, what got you started into the whole coaching thing? What was your drive towards just being a coach?
Good question. So, at the end of the day, I think a lot of people get into fitness because they feel a lack in their own lives. And then a lot of us discover coaching if we grew up and we were mentored by someone and we want to carry on that torch going forward. And that was something like for me, my background was not necessarily nutrition or fitness. I grew up in the agriculture industry. So a lot of my knowledge as a coach is my direct knowledge from the food production side, nutrition, and being able to use that to help clients understand how the food today is produced and teaching them why we choose different foods and maybe why choosing an organic versus a non-organic in certain products or a grass-fed versus a wild caught meat might be different for the nutritional profile piece. So I guess at the end of the day, um, my background, because I was in an industry that I had a lot of mentorship, but I didn't necessarily know fitness at the time, has carried on with me now, where I always enjoyed teaching people and especially wanting them to progress and evolve. So a lot of my clients are actually younger athletes or just newer to fitness in general and are kind of at the beginning of their journey.
Mm.
And a lot of them, it's more of that, how do we build the foundational habits and how do we create these sustainable pieces in our lives that can evolve into something else? So, for example, one of my clients, we focus a lot on not only choosing foods that are going to help her body so that she can optimize her goals, but also how that translates into her career goals or her relationship goals. So I do a lot on the whole life coaching piece, and that's actually something that I'm going to dive more into with my clients is how do we make the lifestyle, whether it's the emotional side, the physical side, the spiritual side. How do we connect all three together? Because a lot of people come to fitness, like I said, because of a missing piece. And then they find out that that whole wheel, everything fits together.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned like the whole life coaching because I've just had I've had a lot of people throughout the years tell me to do like life coaching, and I've always thought it was such a weird field to do. Like, how do you life coach somebody? And I've had friends reach out. I'm like, man, I'm like, I struggle like finances, this and that. Like, I'm not gonna come to you for like finances. Like, I'm good. Like, I would come to you because you have a way to like you know how to fix habits on like mental strength or this and that, how to handle certain aspects. Like, we've seen what you've gone through in your life and where you're at, and we find that like admirable. And one of my clients recently was like, she was a powerlifting programming and stuff, and she was struggling with some situations, and like I was giving her a life tip, like basically just life advice. And she goes, "Man, I'd rather just pay you instead of my therapist." And I was like, "Well, I've had people ask about it, before. And when I was younger, I had teachers tell me I should be like a psychologist because of how I would handle things. And so today we actually had a like our first FaceTime for an hour, and we just talked about life, and I kind of helped her with a bunch of habits and stuff to help her see. And it's mainly that's what we kind of talked about, Leyland, is like a lot of coaches struggle with emotional intelligence, like getting someone to be confident in where they're at with, with the choices that they're making, with their habits, like teach them positive driven habits. Like people do not understand, like one of the ones I drive with a lot of clients is when they say, oh, I'm trying, I'm like, no, you're not, you're doing. Because a lot of people, when they say I'm trying, they usually inevitably like don't do it. Like I can try to pick up my can, or I'm just gonna pick it up. And it's like, oh, that's hard. I'm like, when you say it's hard, you tend to have a habit to like put it in a folder of I'm just not gonna do this.
Mm-hmm.
But if you keep saying, hey man, this is easy, over time, those things become easy. Like if you say, oh, I'm doing this, then eventually you just get in the habit of doing things. Even if you fail, you get back up and do it again. But someone that says, oh, I'm trying. Most people in life that try never get anywhere because they're just always trying instead of just doing it. So it's funny you mentioned the whole life coaching, and I think that's what separates like a good coach from a great coach, and just a trainer, especially a trainer from a coach. Mm-hmm. Like a coach is someone you're meant to help guide them through life,
And that's a really great point. I don't do any in-person training. Everything's online. So all my clients were communicating via email, WhatsApp, FaceTime, Google Meet. But to your point on the trying, I actually heard a quote a few months back through one of the online churches that I follow. And he was talking about how you can be trying to accomplish something or trying to be better in your relationship or marriage. But you need to think about it just like we do in bodybuilding, right? If we're in training, we have a specific goal we're trying to advance and we're trying to be better. So if you think about the other aspects in your life, if you switch from the trying mentality to the I'm in training to be a better wife. Yeah. I'm in training to be a better coach. I'm in training to be a better human being. And a lot of people, once they hear that, they're like, oh, that makes sense. So that you show up every day a little bit more present and a little bit more intentional with what you do and what you say.
I agree with 100%. And I think that goes to the process of, I think when people say they try, they're scared of the failure. They're scared of failing. So they inevitably don't do it. I'm like, and I tell everyone, like me, I seek failure, because when you seek failure, you're inevitable to find success. And that does drive through with the training principles. And I think one of my favorite quotes is, it's a Star Wars, like Yoda, do or do not, there is no try. And it's so dumb and it's so cliche, but it's like, you're either going to do it or you're not. Like, and when I had this conversation with her earlier, I told her, Thomas Edison never tried to build a light bulb. He just did it. He did it wrong until he got it right. But he kept doing it. He never just, oh, I'm going to try to build a light bulb. He's like, no, I'm going to build a light bulb. I just don't know when.
Yep.
He never said I'm going to try. He says I'm going to do this. And I think people don't understand, like when you set a definitive, like this is going to happen no matter how much I put into it, it's different than saying I'm going to try.
Right. One thing I forgot to mention actually is most of my background was in corporate America. So I worked in an agricultural sales role for about 2.5 years before I moved down to Georgia and I transferred over into some other corporate positions. But a lot of coaches don't have a corporate background. Not that it's a bad thing, but I feel like I have a different perspective when it comes to working with a client who does work a 9-to-5 or is in a high executive position, because I've directly seen how that lifestyle is lived. Or especially when you're in sales and you're literally on the road for 10 hours in a day, or you're flying from one place to the next place to the next place in an entire week. How do you make it work? How do you get to the gym? How do you get enough water in? How do you pick your foods? XYZ. So that's one thing I work on with a lot of my clients is that lifestyle piece. And every single person, every single plan is customized to my clients' lifestyles. And I can't emphasize that enough to coaches today. I hear it all the time how, yeah, well, I'm going to start with this base, change the name, and go from there. Okay, I get it. You want to save some time. You got something else you need to do. But remember, we're putting these people's lives in our hands. And if their lifestyle, they are trying to make a lifestyle change and they hired you to fit into that lifestyle, give them that same due diligence and put yourself in their shoes to understand, shoot, they've got 3 kids, spouse, they're doing all this stuff. They're trying to get their health in check. what's the thing that I can do to help them get 1 step, 2 steps closer by just giving them a bit more attention to detail, right? So that's one thing I think, like, I never want to speak down on any personal trainers, any coaches, because we all have our own unique gifts and talents. We all have something we're bringing to the table. We just need to be able to all work together and say, okay, this is what is kind of the golden standard we should all be aiming towards, is the individuality and focusing on what people need, yes, in the present, but also long term. How is this going to affect their long term?
So that actually brings me to an interesting question. You say that you basically individualize every single client that you do have. Why do you think that most coaches don't do that? They just give them like a PDF file and just be like, okay, this is what you do, and then just repeat that over and over again. Like, I understand not like knowing the client schedule and whatnot, but is there a way that can be improved in a sense?
So I can't speak to why every coach does it, but from what I've seen of coaches on teams that I've worked with, a lot of it has to do with the time constraint. And in today's world, we get 24 hours in a day. We're always distracted. We've got our phones going off. We've got our emails going off. We have our own goals we want to accomplish.
Yeah.
So I think people, and this is the thing with macro plans, right?
Hmm.
If a coach is only doing macro plans for all of their clients, it's not necessarily a cookie cutter, right? Because each person can have their own macros, but are they looking at that next layer to the fiber intake, the micronutrient intake, the water intake, the stress, what are the supplements, all those pieces that fit into a person's plan, in my opinion. So honestly, I feel like it's a bit of laziness and it's a bit of that time constraint that people don't want to take that extra time and be like, okay, let me really look at what foods this person doesn't like and not put that into their plan, so they don't think they didn't even hear me. And that's what a lot of people today, and I'm guilty of it, I've seen people do it to me. I literally say something to their face, and within a span of 5 to 10 minutes, they'll repeat back and not even have heard what I said. And I think that's what a lot of people want, is they want to be heard. They want to know not just that they're being heard, but you're listening.
Mhm.
And that's where I think the difference between a good coach and a great coach is, you're not just hearing them, but you're listening. And then you're anticipating what's going to happen with that client.
Mhm.
So if someone's doing a cookie cutter plan, for example, and this person may be a competitive athlete, say they're 12 weeks out from a show. If you are anticipating what's going to happen at 10 weeks out, at 8 weeks out, whether it's a weight decrease or the weight's stalling, how are you going to plan ahead to make those changes for that person's plan? And so I think that's something that coaches are getting better at it, but it's something we can still continue to do better on. And I think the health coaching scene is only going to continue to grow. Even with COVID last year, health coaches in general were getting more business because people realized how important health is at the end of the day.
I mean, I agree completely with that. The idea of like active listening versus like passive listening. Social media has created this construct of just people who are, you're passively paying attention,
Yep.
you're passively listening to everything. So needing to sit down and actually speak and have someone really not just listen to respond, but listen to understand is a huge tool that I think a lot of coaches fail to really implement into it. Is when a person gives you feedback, like, okay, hey, you know, I did this and that. Like, I'll have clients, they'll say like, man, I'm getting bloated. I'm like, okay, at what time are you eating bloated? Is it what after what meals, or like, is it, you know, are you having less water? And they'll say like, okay, you know, over the next few days, stick to where we're going. Let me know when you're eating your bloat. Let me know when this happens. Okay, so it might be this food. Let's swap this out for this, and then we'll see how your body responds. Because that happens over time. I know a lot of people. Not everyone can sit there and just eat, you know, chicken and every like the same source of protein all the time and not expect that something happen. Like, you need to be changing up carb sources, protein sources, fat sources, So, and that's where you have to really sit down and just listen, and that's it. But you have to be there and listen, not just like bobbing the head, like, okay, what's going on? Like, you're just waiting for them to be done so you can like make some adjustments and just and push it off.
Can I add something to that real quick?
Yes.
So I think a big piece that you just mentioned, Charles, that's hard to teach, and it takes a lot of the individual client to figure out, is being able to be that self receptive to know what's going on with their own body.
Self-awareness.
Because yes, self-awareness in today's world almost doesn't exist, and it's crazy to me. But I grew up and I was like super self-aware with my body. I had hormone issues when I was younger, which led to where I'm at now, to being passionate about female hormones. But I was one of the few that was like, there's something that doesn't feel right in my body, or this feels really good. And as I've learned more about my body over the years, I'm 29 years old, still learning about my body, but I've gotten more in tune with it. And that's something like right off the bat, any new client, I'm like, the more details you can give me every single week in your, the better I'm going to be able to help you with your plan, and the better you're going to be feeling, because you're going to know what's going on with your body and know, oh, this food triggered me. Oh, I didn't have a bowel movement. Maybe it was because I didn't drink enough water the night before, or I forgot to take my magnesium, whatever it was. So if there's a way we can help people get more self-aware too, I think is a big learning curve, but it's also a cutting edge that most coaches, not most coaches, I would say coaches don't really talk about it, but the better we can talk about it, educate clients on it, the more success we're going to have.
So I think the problem with that is that I don't want to be specific, but like in this industry, certain coaches think they hold a certain standards according to what they think is right or wrong. So many of the clients that we do get or that we do have are very afraid to basically ask questions, because they assume just because they have a coach, the coach should know everything. So when a coach gives out a specific guidance, they just expect to follow it to the T without ever thinking about it. And that's why most people are not self-aware when it comes to coaching for some, unless the coach actually takes the time out of their day to be able to sit down and explain to the person or respectively answer their questions. Because from what I've been seeing from different like clients that I've been getting recently, it's just like a client would ask a question and the coach would just be like, just do it because I'm your coach. Or like,
I think that's bad coaching.
yeah. And it's runs.
It happens a lot. It was actually my second coach. I was going to do a show in the beginning of 2017, and I got with this coach, and he had me on a protocol, and like it was like 20 weeks out. It was like some shit I should have been taking. I was unaware at the time, and like 35 minutes of fasted cardio, 5 days a week, all this stuff. And I've showed Paul the photos, like there's 19 weeks out, and then you see photos next to it, and I asked him like, how many weeks out do you think? He's like 6 or 7. I was 15 weeks out. In the process of like 4.5 weeks, it looked like I did it at 8 to 10 week prep. And I kept letting him know, I was like, hey dude, like I've been handling like my own nutrition, and I've tried like all the different, minus vegan, I've tried just about every diet method. I've tried them all just to see what they were like. And I told, I'm going to eat meat. I don't care.
Yeah.
And I told him, I was like, hey dude, like something does not feel right. I'm waking up in the middle of the night, covered up blankets. Like my arms feel like popsicles, like literally like to the touching them felt cold. I was like, I don't feel right. Something feels off. And I was like, when am I getting a cheat meal? I was like, when am I getting a refeed? Something. I'm like, it's been 5 weeks of nothing. I'm doing all this cardio. I'm like, I've dropped so much weight. Something doesn't feel right internally. Like I'm letting you know. And he's like, you need to just stop worrying about it. You can have your cheat meal when I tell you. And I was like, and at the time, like one of our mutual friends, Gavin, I messaged him. I was like, hey man, like this and that. And he's like, honestly, dude, it sounds like your metabolism's crashing. And I was like, that's what I thought. I was like, everything feels off. I was like, I haven't dropped weight in days. So I dropped him as a coach. I talked to Gavin about it. We had like talked about an idea of a cheat meal. I woke up in the morning 3 pounds lighter. Later in the day, I dropped another 3 pounds. And I was like, I looked fuller. I was drier. I was leaner. And he was just one of those coaches that, because he had IFBB Pro, he felt that when he gave you something, that was the law.
So I have two thoughts on that. Number one, I don't think it's wrong that when you're working with someone, you need to have trust in them,
Mhm.
right? You you don't necessarily want to question everything that they do.
Agreed.
However, the caveat to that is I feel like, and this is surfacing as of recent, any coach should be able to explain their why and the like, behind the how, so
Mhm.
that the client understands, oh, there's actually a reason as to why we're doing this, and to reassure them. But I also understand the tough love conversation too, because I've been in preps where I felt miserable and the coach said, just keep pushing. You're going to do great. We're almost there. Sometimes depending on the situation, you need that little tough love, but other times you need that empathy and you need to be the consoling one and help that client feel like they're important. So that comes back to the whole emotional intelligence piece is, are you learning your clients' personalities? Are you learning what their motives are? What is it that they need to feel important? Is it you post them on your page? Is it you send them a personalized text or a birthday card? Maybe they want just to get a free sample of a supplement you use or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes these clients, they just want to feel like they still matter and they're not a number to you.
Mhm.
So it's hard because in today's world, and this is a societal issue, that I think society is not allowing people to ask questions anymore. It's more of a black and white, it's yes or no. There's no gray area.
Mhm.
And that's creating a lot of conflict in the world, not just as coaches. So if we can do better of, you know, showing up authentically with values, with being proactive in our communication to say, hey, this is how we do check-ins. And if you've got questions, feel free to send them to me via email every week, and I'll get back to you within the 24 hours as long as you get it to me at this time of day. Stuff like that. People appreciate just wanting to know. And one thing I tell all my clients is, if there's something you don't agree with or you got some type of disgruntled with me, I want to know because I can't get better to help you unless you tell me. And I literally had a conversation with a gal today. We changed her plan because she has been stalling out, and she almost immediately sends me a text. She's like, Caroline, I can't do this. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, the change you made, I'm getting overwhelmed looking at this, and I'm changing her from a macros plan to a little bit more structured of a plan because her hormones are off too. And I was like, look, I know it's going to be hard, but I also know what you're capable of. And so one thing that I need you to do is trust me. And going forward, we'll work on this together. I want to collaborate with you to make sure this fits your lifestyle, but I also need you to give me a little bit of trust here that if we make your plan a little bit more strict just for a little bit, that we'll see results faster than we have in the past month. And so just being able to talk the client through your logic and also being able to understand what's going on in their lives, it makes a huge difference. And most of these clients, like I talk to them like friends because, you want to know what's going on in their personal life. And like my one gal, she just got a new puppy and was talking about her nursing school that she just started up again. And all those little things add up to the rapport building to help build that trust so that when these tough conversations come along and they start to get emotional, you're able to see that and be able to pick it out and have a logical conversation without the emotion.
That's so interesting. That's kind of how I do my coaching.
Mhm.
Yeah. Did you have a gal yell at you for changing your plan too?
No, that's my girlfriend.
It's true.
That's funny.
But no, it's that like attentiveness and then being able to like really focus on the individual is just, we don't have that anymore. And I think I understand why. When you use social media as a medium to create your business, depending on how popular or how famous you are, you will get a whole bunch of clients, And it comes to the point where you can't really give them that individual attention that they need. And I think that's where most of the coaching issue kind of has an issue, is because like we have some coaches that have a lot of clients and they get lazy, which is understandable. But at the same time, if you know that you're going to get lazy with that many clients, there are people's lives at your hands. You don't get that many clients.
Right. Yep. And we're seeing that directly with these new announcements about the abuse of PEDs and performance enhancing, because if literally somebody is only modifying the enhancement piece and they're not changing diet plans for 10 weeks,
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense.
No.
Those do not, 1 and 1 do not add up to 2 in that instance. So, I think, and I've seen this with some coaches who've grown their businesses successfully, just like a regular brick and mortar business, as you start to grow and scale, if you aren't able to set processes and create your own personal structure, that's where things fall through the cracks and people get lazy. But if you can figure out, okay, I'm going to do my check-ins this way, and I'm going to do my communication with these 2 options, and I'm going to set that this day of the week is my only plan creation day, or this day of the week is my podcast day, whatever it may be. People are super successful when we create structure. Humans are creatures of habit. So even as a coach or a client, if you can create that structure as you're scaling, I think it can make it a lot better. But there is a point where, to your point, the diminishing return of, can you be the best coach that you can be with this number of clients if you go higher than that number of clients? And some coaches just only see the money. And so then they just keep going up, and then the quality of service down.
Well, and this goes to the idea, like, everybody wants to do a show, and all of a sudden now they're a coach, So, and because you'll see these like successful coaches and like that look like they have a great living, and what they don't understand is most of these coaches that you're seeing now on social media that are like making a lot of money, that just happened like in the last few years. Like, it was never that way. They struggled, charging low prices and working their way up to eventually, like, they got to a point where they're like, hey man, like, my price now is worth this much, and I'm only going to take on this many clients because I'm trying to maintain my quality over quantity. And I see a lot of these younger people coming in, and I mean, I had a bad thing about that too. Like, I charge such a minimal price until like Paul and even David was like, dude, like, looking at how you do these things, like, that's you need to charge a little bit more than that. And it's funny because I've seen some like high-end coaches, like, I'll look at like their meal plans and everything. I'm like, did you just copy and paste that? Like, is that all that was? And it is, but and often it usually is, because they're trying to all they see is that number value and then the multiplication of how many clients they have. And it happens so much. But the problem with that is a lot of those coaches, you'll see them, they're like, oh, I have X amount of wins next to my name. Well, yeah, when you pump out hundreds of clients, but you have not many returning to you, you're going to have those numbers. And people will look at that like, oh, they're a successful coach. And I'm like there's a coach in Houston that had some stuff happen to him recently, and the guy talks about his pros, and I'm like, I've never heard of your pros. I don't know them.
Does he have any cons?
There's a lot of cons, but that's a different story. I think she knows.
That's why he's in trouble.
Trouble, yeah. The con is there.
Yeah.
If things go through, he's gonna be a con.
Yeah. So that actually goes right into one of the pillars of my business and how I coach people, is focusing on longevity, because there's so many, like your point, there's clients that you'll see them compete 1-2 years and then they're gone, and you find a picture of them 3 years later and they're 30 pounds up, and you're like, what happened to this person? Mm-hmm. And for me, like, I would rather take my time with a client, not push enhancers, not push them to get on a stage, make sure it fits their lifestyle, their current stress situation, their other life priorities first, and then see where it fits in. I actually just took on a client. She's a triathlon runner, And she's like, Caroline, I just need somebody to do my nutrition and possibly some weight training, and that's it. And start diving in a little deeper. And she got some stress management things that we'll have to work on. But, for her, she already has her end goal of she's going to do a triathlon before she turns 50 next year. She looks incredible already. So now it's just my job to make sure that she stays the path, and we're getting her nutrition optimized for her recovery and for her training sessions, because triathlons are a whole nother beast. But, the longevity piece in this sport of bodybuilding specifically, I have about half of my clients who are competitors, the other half are lifestyle. I will treat both of them in the same way regarding the supplementation and the stress, and making sure that we have things in place that are going to help them live their longest life. And if you ask me, to anyone down the street, they're like, how old do you want to live till? My goal is 120. Because of today's technology and knowing what we can do with our bodies and our health, I can make it to 120 pretty easily if I take care of myself, manage my stress. And people will be like, oh, well, I don't want to do that. It's like, okay, but I will help you to my best ability to live a pain-free, healthy life that you're healthy on the inside and it's reflected on the outside. And that's my ultimate goal, is if we can get somebody's body functioning well on the inside, we can optimize the aesthetics and that strength on the outside.
100%. I don't know. People look at age and they think of like, oh, and then the problem is they think of older and they think of like worn down. And it's like, if you take care of yourself and exercise, you're okay. Like, you're gonna have a better life. Like, add some strength training in there. It increases longevity, muscle density, bone density, so on and so forth. Like, and people should understand that. I mean, I'm 34 going on 35, and if I were to shave off a little facial hair I have, people would think I'm like 20 years old. So I don't know if I'm just Benjamin Button in life and like reverse aging at some point, and I'll just end up shitting myself in diapers, who knows. But I think a lot of people just don't understand like the longevity when it comes to exercise. They think like, am I going to maintain this size my whole life? Like, no. Like, even when I was natty, I still had a pretty big physique. But it's just lift, eat, like
Sleep.
stress, sleep. Yes, sleep. People do not understand sleep.
It's very hard for clients specifically that have never been into the whole like fitness aspect of things to do all that, because when they see those people who are like fit,
Mm-hmm.
they assume it has to be some sort of extremity.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the problem comes in, because certain clients don't really know the sustainable aspect of it.
Mhm.
It's more about like, what can I do to get from this month to this month, and how can I
Right.
And that is where being a coach is where we come in and say, hey, we kind of have to change things around. I know you want to get to this so and so particular point, but let's think about doing it the slowest way possible.
Mhm.
And get there in a sustainable amount of time, or make it be a new habit you can kind of live with for the rest of your life. And
Mm-hmm.
when you tell them that, they're just like, what? You could do that? But like, once they start seeing those like little changes, they keep on going and going and going and going. So we have to find a way where like, just not have it so extreme, not have outsiders look at it in a form of like, I have to do this extreme stuff to look like that. What if, let's say a client were to come to you and be like, hey, I want to compete in about 12, 16 weeks. How would you handle that?
If a client just came to me like that?
Yeah, gaming like that.
I have one like that. So the first thing I always do is I ask about their health history and their medical background, because number one, if they have a pre-existing condition or they've had labs run and they had something come up in the lab work that is a red flag, I have the tough love conversation. I'm like, look, if you have elevated liver enzymes and we decide to prep, or you have a thyroid dysfunction, we decide to prep, it's not usually going to improve through a prep. If you have gut issues before we prep, those are going to get worse, because as a sport, bodybuilding is an extreme. So I'm transparent with people. I want them to understand what they're getting themselves into, because when I first competed, I did it as like an extreme weight loss measure. I ended up dropping 22 pounds. It was right after college when I started my first sales job. And I put on all this weight from drinking and eating out all the time. And I was doing training 6 to 7 days a week and doing HIIT cardio in the morning, fasted, and
Jesus.
all this crazy stuff. And I was natural, and it still ended up affecting my hormones. I lost my period right away and ended up with some thyroid dysfunction, metabolic damage. And so, no matter the person, there's always going to be some type of implication from doing something to a new extreme. So, if someone came to me and wanted to compete, like you got to look at their physique, of course, and give them an honest, subjective opinion. Um, there's a gal who also came to me. She was with me 1 month and then left after I gave her her plan and was like, yeah, I think I can do wellness. What do you think? I was like, well, you could do figure or wellness. Honestly, your frame is better for figure if you're willing to wait. And she was like, well, I want to do a show. I'm like, okay, help you get ready for a show. So like I sent her over her plan and I tailored it to the food that she liked and everything. And she's like, well, thank you, but I think I'm gonna go on to someone else. I'm like, okay. So as a coach, that was a learning curve for me. But there's gonna be people like that too. And usually you can tell right away talking with someone how serious they are of working with you. And if all they do is question everything, or if all they do is actually show enthusiasm when you're talking about like your expertise and your skill set, usually you're going to be able to know, are they going to stay with me or are they not? And for me, one of my biggest focus areas is the female hormone balance. I've had amenorrhea. I've had issues with all my hormones being bottomed out because of prepping. Currently, I have on paper hypothyroidism, so I'm working through that. And I've had gut issues galore, food sensitivities causing cystic acne, like you name it. I've had issues with it. I've also used performance enhancers, so I know some things about them in ways that for women that can be effective, but also things that maybe they should watch out for. And so whenever a female comes to me, that's always one of the first questions I ask too is what are your labs? Have you had labs? What is your period like? Have you been on any previous performance enhancers, even caffeine, which does count? Fat burners do count. And going from there, because if you don't know someone's baseline, how can you build off of that?
Exactly. And it's funny you mentioned in the very beginning, like the idea of like foundational, and that's something like, we stressed out in the last podcast with Leland is I feel so many coaches are getting caught up in the clinic side of coaching that they're losing sight of the foundational. Like every coach nowadays is a guru of PEDs, and it's like, have you ever considered maybe just like fixing like their training and nutrition? Like,
Oh, wait, really? That's a thing?
weird, like, and they're like, oh yeah, like, and it's so crazy. Like, him and I had that conversation that it's like, it only becomes a clinical setting whenever you have these coaches who start putting people on pharmacies of pets. And it's like, now you do need to turn into a clinical situation because it's no longer just nutrition, training, making sure their recovery is optimal. And now you're getting into an area where it's like, you're adding in way too many variables. You kind of do need to have an understanding of what's going on, which is frustrating. It's a very frustrating thing because it's like, I think if a lot of these coaches just step back and focus on the foundation of things, we would see a bigger turnaround. But at the same time, you see big names come out of nowhere, and it's like, the coaches they're with are known to push pharmacies on people, and all of a sudden they go from being a nobody to a pro. Like, oh my God, this is the next. They're going to be an Olympia, and you get caught up in that cycle, and it just happens to a lot of people, and we see the result that happened, unfortunately, and it's pretty sad. But I think as other coaches, like that's where it has to come to a level of accountability. Is like, I think people need to start standing up against them and say, hey man, like that's not cool.
Yeah.
Like,
And there's the thing too, I actually forgot. A lot of people forget about birth control and how that affects the female body. And at the end of the day, it's the female's choice. It's the client's choice. So if the client wants to stay on it, great. I know how to adjust around that and how to not give certain supplements that are going to affect the birth control. If she's wanting to come off, perfect. I will make a plan with her so that she can come off birth control and not have the potential side effects and repercussions that come off of being on a artificial hormone for 10 plus years, which most of these women have been on since their teenage years. So that's a whole nother caveat that a lot of coaches don't think about, or they just don't have the experience in. And, as we continue to change as a society and we see what's happening in the world with regard to our personal health rights, that's going to be something that we need to have as a foundation as coaches, is understanding each person has their own individual health rights, whether they get a poke or they don't get a poke. That's their choice. Cool. I don't judge you for that, but I need to know it because it can affect your menstrual cycle and it can affect your autoimmune conditions. And we know this because of previous blood work I've seen the changes from.
Yeah,
So
that's crazy. That's a lot of people aren't aware of that either. And it's nuts. Like when you start getting into the medical side of that, like you choose to get it, great, man, but it 100% it's affecting people like left and right. And I haven't had a flu shot in like 10 plus years. I don't. When I joined the military, I went through like an assembly line of just getting stuck with things. And like since I've gotten out and I don't do anything. I'm pretty sure my brother had COVID last year in the very beginning of 2020 because he was sick for 2 weeks and had all the symptoms it was before it's ever hit big. And I lived with him. I coughed for 2 days and I was good.
Yeah.
I exercise. I take care of myself. I stay hydrated. I'm always moving, doing stuff like that. But yeah, people do not understand that stuff and it's something you have to let people know.
Yeah, it's more on the education. It's not necessarily like, oh my God, you're gonna go get the poke. I'm not gonna work with you, but I want you to understand these are some things we're gonna have to consider because we don't know how your body's gonna respond from that. So there's too much in the air. And as a health coach, part of it is we're playing detective, right? Because if we're not medical doctors, if we're not registered dietitians, we're learning that person's body and responses along with them. So the more knowledge we have, the more relative experience we have, it definitely helps. The more training that we have, it helps. But at the end of the day, like there's coaches that, to our earlier discussion, they're going to just throw a standard protocol at someone because quote unquote, it works. And they're going to expect it to work. And then that's going to be your person who gets SIBO, or that's going to be your person who gets amenorrhea or PCOS, whatever it might be. And then we're going to shorten their lifespan in the sport or their overall interest in fitness and living a healthy lifestyle because of one coach doing something that wasn't going to benefit the client. It was more to benefit themselves.
It's negligible coaching. Yeah.
So this brings up a question. Do you think online coaching should be regulated?
Should it be what?
Regulated.
So it already is in some states. I think I don't have the choice to decide if it's going to be or not. However, I do believe that in the United States, we should have the freedom to allow coaching in this regard if there are some sets of standards in place. What those look like, I'm not sure. But I do believe in the next few years, there's going to be more regulation on it. I know there are certain states that are already only allowing RDs to technically write nutrition meal plans for people.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to only get broadened. However, certain certifications and organizations, I think, will try to mitigate that by offering some type of certification, what have you. I think it could help the industry, but I also think, you've got coaches who've been doing it 10, 20 years that have a lot of good relative experience, but just never went back to school. And those are the ones that's going to hurt. So I don't, I'm never like, I sound like I'm in the gray area. Like, it's not like,
Kind of where we need to be.
Yeah.
yeah. So that's the problem, right? As far as like politics and the way that society is morphing, it's gonna end up happening. So where do we have the chance to impact it? How do we impact it locally? And like I'm in Georgia. Georgia, as far as the state, the regulations, they're not as strict. I think Texas is pretty much the same way. So when is that time going to come where our states do get more strict when it comes to health coaching? I don't know. So all I can do right now is be the best coach that I can be, continue to get learnings from my mentors, from my courses that I take, from being more present and acknowledging when there's things I can learn more about, but also being very firm in my strengths and knowing when this is subject matter that I am a skilled, not expert, but I'm more advanced in and I'm confident in doing.
So let's talk about the coaching on the bodybuilding and fitness physique competitive aspect.
Mhm.
Like the idea of regulation. Would you say it would be a good idea for the NPC and IFBB and the Olympia to basically set up a specific regulation against certain coaches based on their previous horrible experience that they have with clients?
Yes, I would agree, honestly.
So I think there needs to be my my thoughts on the NPC IFBB is when they originally put their standards in place. I don't know when the last time was that they modified those standards. You look at the judging criteria for classes and what they are selecting at shows are not 100% reflective to what is written. So that is where I have a hard time, because if you're going to write down one thing as your rules and your criteria, but you're going to do something else, what's to say that creating some type of rule of the coaches that you're going to allow to coach versus the ones that you're not going to allow to coach based on someone's personal experience or a written program that they got emailed, it's going to be really hard, I think, for them to follow through.
Yeah.
And that's my personal experience, and nothing against the organization, right? I'm still a competitor. I'm still a coach for people who compete, but I don't know how they're going to enforce it unless it's individual promoters who own and operate these shows that decide this coach's athletes cannot compete at my show. I don't know if the whole organization could actually mandate that.
Yeah, that is a hard one. I think if there was a way to, one way to maybe mitigate that would be, let's say if a coach, in a recent scenario, a bunch of things came out about a certain coach. Well, organization leaders could say, you can continue doing what you're doing. You're not welcome on any NPC premises, like any. So as a coach, that's going to make it harder, like for him to be able to coach when he's not there.
He wasn't going to the shows anyways.
Yeah.
So that's irrelevant because he was literally in his house.
Well, I'm saying not another situation, but yeah, no, that one's honestly, that would have been a big giveaway for me. Like a coach who literally just sits in his house the whole time and doesn't go to a single show of his athletes. I'd be like, I wouldn't trust that. But I guess that's just my perspective of it.
Well,
he was still getting results.
Yeah.
That's the issue, right?
Yeah.
So my feelings on it, until the judges stop rewarding the certain look that these athletes were bringing on stage,
Yes,
these issues are still going to be there, and the abuse of drugs is still going to be present because that's what the coaches know is work. That's what they know works, even though there's plenty of other ways to do it to make an athlete look good.
I do agree with that. And I think that's something Paul and I have talked about before. And I think we both came to the assumption, like, until they stop rewarding certain looks, it's only going to continue progressing past that. Because what happens though, they reward a certain look, then someone comes in a little bit more and they're like, well, they reward that person, because now you have to keep pushing that envelope to the point that you had a set standard and someone who came in and out edged that standard, and you're like, hey, that person stood out next to everybody. And that's, that you keep pushing that envelope. So I do think they should have very preset standards. It's almost the same like, powerlifting. We still have situations in powerlifting where, it's your squat has to go to this depth, your bench, pause and then lock out, and deadlift, so on and so forth, that you have standards. And there are times where a lifter might not hit depth or so on and so forth. And it's kind of hard for judges to see that sometimes, depending on like a body, how they look. But at the end of the day, it's like there's still a preset standard, and it's been across the board that if you show up and you don't squat to depth, like, you're not getting that squat. Like, it's not as subjective as bodybuilding is, but it's still, I've been to enough meets to see there's still some subjectivity based on if some judges are favorite a certain lifter. But at the end of the day, it's bodybuilding has to kind of reduce some of that subjectivity, make it more standardized.
Right. Well, and that's part of it's human error too.
Exactly.
So I grew up doing livestock judging. It's very similar.
Oh,
One
yeah.
day you look at livestock and you're like, well, this heifer, she's the most complete. And then the next day you're like, well, she's going to be in second because this one's more of the brood cow look. And that's what we're going with today. So it's literally like the same way with bodybuilding. One day they're picking the fuller muscle bodies, and the next day they're picking the harder, more conditioned look. So even at the amateur level, and this is a big pressure point that I've had several conversations with women about. They're like, Caroline, can I actually go pro natural? And I was like, I've seen girls go pro natural. I've had girls go pro in my class natural. However, it depends on what you want your time frame to be in the sport and what you want to do to your body. And so always is up to the athlete, as long as I'm coaching, always up to the athlete to decide how they want their timeline to be. I always talk pros and cons. I always talk hypothetical, because a person's body might respond differently to one thing versus another. And the sport, unfortunately, we see 90% of the athletes on stage are enhanced in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just a fat burner like a clenbuterol, even in the bikini division. And I heard some atrocious drug stacks for bikini athletes who just turned pro. So unfortunately, it's happening. And that's something that I'm passionate about, is just the education piece. That's why I put together my course on Feminine Health Enhanced, talking about what people are actually using, but more importantly, how you can avoid side effects and be smart if you are going to enhance in any way, shape, or form, and helping people understand, like, you don't have to, but if you choose to, it's your choice and you can do it in a safe, efficient way with longevity in the sport.
Exactly. Perfect. That is pretty much a pretty good closing way to close the entire thing. I do have to ask though, you as a coach, give me, like, let's say 3 things that you cherish the most as a coach. Like, what are the important core value for you and your clients?
As far as like my coaching, what's my core values or what I expect out of my clients?
Both.
Okay. So first and foremost is just having mutual respect for each other. So I will treat you better than I want to be treated. And remember, at the end of the day, we're all human. So that goes with the clear communication piece and, open and honest communication. If there's something you're enjoying and is working really well, let me know. If there's things that aren't working, I need to know so we can fix it. Besides that, one of my top values is the hormone health and making sure the internal health is intact. So I always encourage, I don't require it, but I encourage my clients to get labs. If someone's considering any PEDs, I will make them get labs so that we know where everything's at to start. And I am trained to read regular blood work as well as Dutch tests. And then one thing that I value highly is the female body as a whole and honoring the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. So I will actually change a female's protocol for nutrition as well as the training piece based on where she's at in her menstrual cycle. And I've been trialing this with myself as well as several clients, because our bodies, as our hormones change through the 28 average days of the menstrual cycle, so does our strength, so does our energy. So we can change how we should be eating, how we should be training, which week needs to be the deload week, which week needs to be, this is my PR week, I'm going to push as heavy as I can on my compound lifts week. And then maybe one of those weeks, that's when we will cut out carbs a little bit. The week before the period, all my ladies get chocolate. So that's a perk. But, you know, that's honestly for
Funny story
me,
about that.
I've had coaches that didn't care about me being a female and understanding that I am not a little man. And that, I forget who said the quote, but it's like, females are not small men. And that's honestly like how I live as a coach, is I want my females to know, like, I see you and I appreciate you, and I want you to feel like I'm treating you as an individual woman with a body that's always changing.
Agreed. That's perfect. Where do you think people can find you? Like, what are your websites, your handles, and such?
Yeah, so I'm everywhere pretty much as Strong Sweet Caroline, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. My website is strongsweetcaroline.com. If someone's interested in coaching, or even just posing coaching, I do consults as well. So if you've got questions on performance enhancers, or you want me to look through your labs, or you just want to talk about a diet change, I'll do a 1-hour consult with people on that. So email will be the best way, strongsweetcaroline@gmail.com, just to make sure I see it, because my DMs sometimes overwhelm me, so I don't look at them all the time. But yeah, other than that, like, I'm always available, and I'm trying to create more free resources. So my YouTube, I'm trying to create a lot of videos about hormone health, cooking videos. I love healthy baking, so that's something I'm trying to put more out there. And then I do have my new course, which I'm launching September. I just had to change a date because of the passing of my coach, so I'm trying to finalize what date I'm doing it in September. But that'll be on, like I said, safe, smart enhancement and the education behind performance enhancers.
Does that course cover the you said like the 28 days of like learning how to manipulate nutrition, everything with women through their menstrual
It
cycle?
actually does not. I'm probably gonna be creating something separate for that.
Also, why do you give them chocolate?
Oh, that's a secret. Well, so the biggest reason, number one, your oh my gosh, metabolism increases the late luteal phase. So the week before a woman starts her bleed, your metabolism's ramping up because essentially she's shedding basically what was going to be an organ. So women usually get hotter during that week, and they actually will get more hungry. So they can increase their calories by almost 200 calories that week. So I usually do like a half an ounce to an ounce of dark chocolate. And dark chocolate is high in antioxidants as well as magnesium, which are very important for the menstrual phase.
It's funny because whenever his siblings were in town, she came out and was asking for like ibuprofen, and he's like, "You got a headache?" And she's like, "No, I'm having some problems." And I knew like right away, I knew what it was. She was starting a period, and he's like, "Oh," he like looks at me, and he's like, he doesn't really know how to handle it. And I was like, I looked at her, I was like, "Honey," I was like, "Do you need some Midol or some Aleve or something like that?" And she's like, "Yeah." So I went to the store and literally bought her some dark chocolate and Aleve. So, but I mean, I've been engaged, so like,
Girls are bashful about that though, especially when they're younger. So
but yeah, I told Paul, I was like, "Wow," I was like, "Well, you know, dark chocolate." I'm like, it's a lot of the antioxidants and stuff. I'm like, it just helps them a lot. I'm like, trust me, like I've been engaged, and every time that was coming along, it's like I came back with Aleve and dark chocolate. It just
there you go.
Awesome. Greatly appreciate your time, and thank you very much.